And we begin this morning with the story of how the actions of an international criminal could backfire on the Nigerian police. The Inspector General of Police has ordered a review into claims the Deputy Commissioner of Police, Abba Kyari, took money from notorious Nigerian fraudster Ramon Abbas, popularly known as Hush Puppy. Well, according to the United States court documents, Abbas has pleaded guilty to money laundering. And Arise News managing editor, Christian Ogodo, tells us more.
It may have started about half a decade ago with the lavish lifestyle of Nigeria's most notorious fraudster, Ramon Abbas, popularly known as Hush Puppy, who's been on the radar of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, FBI, for his high-profile internet fraud activities. He recklessly flaunted his ill-gotten wealth on social media and ended up providing damaging information with which he was nailed by the authorities in the U.S. Trailed by the FBI with dossier of his financial scams and enough evidence to get a long-term jail conviction, Hush Puppy was arrested in Dubai on June 10, 2020. And according to Dubai police, Hush Puppy was arrested for multiple fraud charges along with about a dozen of his accomplices. The 38-year-old king of fraud had over 2 million Instagram followers where he displayed unbridled ostentation. After spending months in jail, reality dawned on him and he quickly struck a deal with the prosecutor. Part of the deal requires him to give details of the scams, reveal his co-conspirators and their roles in the scam. He pleaded guilty to fraud of about $24 million and has a 20-year sentence awaiting formal confirmation by the district court in California. Hush Puppy's travails has led to another canker worm being opened and robbing Nigeria's Super Cup and Deputy Commissioner of Police Abba Kyari, who is listed amongst the people Hush Puppy wired money to. Hush Puppy had sworn to an affidavit before a California district court in the U.S. that he paid bribes to Nigeria's police chief Abba Kyari to have one of his rivals, Kelly Chibuzo, arrested and jailed in Nigeria following a dispute over $1.1 million fraud obtained from a Qatari businessman by pretense. With a fraud deal gone sour, Vincent informed the Qatari businessman that he was being scammed by him and Abbas. And infuriated by Vincent's revelation, Hush Puppy allegedly wired money to Abbas Kyari to facilitate the arrest and incarceration of Vincent. The evidence against Deputy Commissioner of Police in a court document obtained by Arise News channel from the United States District Court for the Central District of California reads between the United States and Ramon Olorunwa Abbas, Abdurrahman Imran Juma, Vincent Kelly Chibuzo, Abba Alhaji Kyari, Rukayat Motunrayo Fashola, Bolatito Tawakalitu Agbabiaka, all defendants. The criminal complaints by telephone or other reliable electronic means are incontrovertible pieces of evidence as can be found on the documents. The WhatsApp conversations showed how Nigeria's Super Cup arrested Chibuzo illegally on the instructions and inducement of Abba Kyari and his team by Hush Puppy. The court papers also show that this was not the only time that Abbas arranged payments for Kyari. For example, on May 20th, 2020, Abbas sent Kyari transaction receipts for 2 transactions from accounts at Nigerian banks, GT Bank and Zenith Bank. The amount on the transaction receipts total 8 million naira, which was approximately $20,600. It is all these pieces of evidence that have smeared Nigeria's Super Cup image, Abba Kyari, and paint a grim picture of how some law enforcement agents abuse public trust and confidence. Abba Kyari is believed to live a lavish lifestyle with his immediate family, hobnobbing with questionable characters. Only recently, he was in Oba with Obi Kubana, another spendthrift who displays wanton wealth at social occasions. Will Abba Kyari become a fall guy? Will Nigeria have the political will to accede to the orders of the United States courts? Only time will tell. Christian Ogodo, Arise News.
I must say, Rufai, Dr. Bati, this is very detailed and very frightening. And a police officer who is involved in crime fighting should not be seen with certain things or certain people, should stay away from them.
Very frightening, and the evidence is quite stark. So I read the entire court deposition. It's about 69 pages. It's even deeper than we see on the surface. All the interactions, up to the extent of how when Abba Kyari visited Dubai, Hush Puppy arranged a car for him to move him around. How Abba Kyari sent to Hush Puppy the time he was honored at the National Assembly, I got a standing ovation. I think that's the only man that has gotten a standing ovation from the National House of Representatives. You know, how he sent it, and Hush Puppy's reply was, "I'm so happy to be your boy, sir." And the constant interactions, the bank transactions across the various banks, the arrests, and the other people in the deal. There's also a Kenyan person. There's also the case of Rukayat Fashola, how these people are accessories to all of this. I mean, if you read that 69 pages, it's quite heavy. One thing is certain. Abba Kyari has got a case to answer. The police IGP has said that they're going to review this. It was said that Abba Kyari put in a rebuttal on Facebook yesterday. Said the only transaction he made with Hush Puppy was collection of a certain amount to give his tailor. You know, that has led to jokes on social media, Kyari clothing, Abba Couture and the likes and things like that. But this is heavy. One thing is certain. This will impinge on the integrity of the police. It has already. And the question is, more investigation needs to go on how do we have other people that are doing this? And most importantly, Abba Kyari needs to go to America to answer for his case. He needs to face the court system in America. I mean, it is only when the court system clears him we can come and say his integrity has not been tainted. He's innocent until he's proven guilty, but he needs to answer for it. The question is, will the Nigerian government give him up? Will he be allowed to go face whatever allegations against him in America? Or 69 pages? That is why it's heavy out there. Heavy.
Dr. Bati.
Yeah, I don't know whether I have enough minutes to be able to comment effectively on this, but I'll try.
Okay.
Now, the first point is that let's look at the lessons that we need to learn from this. The first lesson will seem to be, if you are wearing white, don't go near the retailers of palm oil.
Okay.
Otherwise, you'll get tainted.
I remember that
in this
today.
particular case, Abba Kyari seems to be wearing white, described as super cop, but he moved too close to people with palm oil, and it's been tainted in that regard. Yes, however, the presumption of innocence inures to him. So you are guilty until you are proven to be so. Now, but I don't think, you can just wake up like that and go to the U.S. to answer for his case. There's due process. And part of that due process is what the affected institution, the Nigerian police, is trying to kick into place. If he was a junior officer, he will go through what they call orderly room trial. But because he's a deputy commissioner of police, he has to face a committee. And the police in Nigeria, they will have to establish whether he's actually guilty or not. Because the allegations against him do not only apply to the American jurisdiction, they also apply to the Nigerian jurisdiction. And they will seem to be on the surface of it a violation of Principle 6 and Principle 7 of the Nigerian Police Code of Conduct, whereby, as a police officer, you are not supposed to collect any form of gratuity or to get engaged in any matter that would seem to be a matter of conflict of interest. The second part, lesson, will seem to be, the company you keep can affect your brand. Discuss. And this one, I'm sure you know that.
I know that.
Here is a super cop, a man that is supposed to, investigate crime and apprehend criminals, who, on more than one occasion, has been seen having phone calls and all of that. So you have to watch the company you associate with very carefully. The third point, third lesson, in my view, I've not gone into the details of the case yet.
Yes.
Maybe when the finish comes.
Okay.
The third point is that, look, this warrant of arrest that was given in a court district in California was first requested for in February, again in April. It was only when it was unsealed on July 26 that we got to know of the involvement of Abba Kyari, Deputy Commissioner of Police, in this whole saga. If it was in Nigeria, that thing will have leaked a long time ago. And you can see that the FBI has been very professional, very detailed. And I guess it's on the basis of that, that many people have been pronouncing Abba Kyari guilty. But we have to give him the benefit of the doubt. We must avoid the error of trial by media. But there are other details, as I said earlier, in this case that I would like to comment, maybe when Ifeni comes with a newspaper review. But we should focus, at this preliminary level, on some of the lessons that we can immediately draw. But it cannot go to the U.S. until there is a specific request for extradition.
Yes.
So the U.S. court will have to have a specific request to Nigeria for extradition. And when it gets to that stage, well, this won't happen overnight because he can still also go to court to try to defend himself. But it looks very ugly for him and also for the police institution in Nigeria.
Well said. On a lighter note, Dr. Bati, I'm on white. I will not go anywhere close to palm oil sellers this morning. Well, that's all on the news headlines. We'll take a short break now. When we return, we'll have Rotus Odiri, Michael Wilson, Erin Akredula, and myself to give you updates on Africa global business, COVID-19, as well as sporting activities across the globe. Stay with us.
All right, welcome back to the morning show right on the Rise News channel. Rotus, we're back to you this morning. Rotus, how are you doing? Let's talk business.
Yes, I'm fine. Let's talk business. Good morning, Rufai. Good morning, Doctor. Good morning, Adiswa. Good morning to all our viewers. You should have a circular on screen, which was released by the Central Bank of Nigeria yesterday. And it is essentially just, following up on the point, or the verbal mandate that was made at the end of the MPC meeting, Monetary Policy Committee meeting, in that deposit money banks should set up touch points, or rather teller centers from which they can sell foreign exchange to end users. That's you and I and all our viewers. So that's the circular on there, which is essentially mandating that this has to happen. On the same point, we saw an appreciation in the Naira to about 520 from 525 on the parallel market. On the I&E window, investors and exporters window, the NAFEX, it's still at about 411 yesterday, 411. So there's still that, sizable margin between both markets. But there was a meeting with some head CEOs of banks. Herbert Wigwe, head of the GMD of Access Bank, said that the banks have pledged to support the central bank's initiative here with respect to getting foreign exchange down to end users. Nobody's questioning the determination of the banks or whether or not they'll be able to do it. The issue, though, is about supply and whether or not they'll be able to have the supply in order to meet the demand for foreign exchange. But they reiterated what the central bank said, from personal travel allowance to business travel allowance to school fees, medical bills, and so on and so forth. The banks are saying that they will be able to do that. On the same matter, the central bank said it's going to start refunding licensing fees back to Bureau de Change, BDCs whose licenses were in the middle of being processed when the announcement at the end of the MPC meeting was being made. So again, central bank is just following up on what it said. It's not going to, give any more foreign exchange or sell any more foreign exchange to the BDCs. And so if there's a license that's been in the middle of being processed, it's going to give them back their money, and that's the end of that. On the BDCs, though, they've said that they're still in business, and which is, technically correct. They're just not going to get any more supply from the central bank, so they're going to have to just source for foreign exchange from like everyone else that participates in the parallel market. They have to get their own foreign exchange from elsewhere. But the BDCs are saying that they are still in business, essentially. We move to infrastructure. Boss Mustafa, Secretary to the Government of the Federation, he was at a Business Hallmark Public Policy Forum, which had the theme, Nigeria's Infrastructure Revolution, Road to a New Future. And he disclosed, well, we kind of already know this, but still, it's important to remind folks of what the price tag is for improving infrastructure. 2.3 trillion naira, which is about $150 billion annually, in order to get us to where we need to be as far as infrastructure upgrades. he, of course, admitted what we know in that government revenues are constrained, which was made worse by the COVID-19 pandemic. We've been in 2 recessions now in the last 5 years. And so there's going to be support needed from the private sector in order for Nigeria to get to her infrastructure goals. And on that note, actually later on the Global Business Report, about 3:30 p.m., we'll be speaking to someone, representative from the International Finance Corporation, the IFC. There's a report that they've put out about creating markets in Nigeria. It's a private sector study that they've done. That ties into what Boss Mustafa is looking at, in that you've got to boost the private sector in order for them to be, for the private sector to be able to invest, in projects side by side in collaboration with the government. So we'll be talking to a member of the IFC about that later on. But that report is out, and so there are some, prescriptions and specific sectors that can assist in getting us where we need to be in terms of infrastructure. To the NSIA, the Sovereign Investment Authority, the head, Mr. Uche Oji, who's been on the morning show, spoken to you all, was speaking to the media and said that the NSIA, the Nigerian Sovereign Investment Authority, is going to be investing about $200 million in a number of healthcare projects, healthcare upgrades. He says that a world-class hospital is being targeted in Abuja, the capital. They plan on building 3 of those this year, 2021. There's 6 months to go, or less than, but three of them this year, 7 of them in 2022, and another 10 in 2023. This involves, cancer centers, radiology, diagnostics. Healthcare, of course, has been at the forefront of the discussion since the COVID-19 pandemic hit. We've seen what COVID has done with respect to healthcare centers around the world and around the country, excuse me. And so this is pretty necessary. Now, if anyone's wondering why is the NSIA building hospitals, it's part of the NSIA's mandate. There's a stabilization fund, which there's a 20% allocation that goes there as part of the funds under management. There is a future generation fund, a 40% allocation there, and then there's an infrastructure fund. If you go to the NSIS website and look up their fund mandates, that's another 40% allocation. So this hospital healthcare initiative falls under the 40% allocations for infrastructure in Africa's largest economy. Finally, we go to South Africa. Tito Mboweni, the very outspoken finance minister of South Africa, says that South Africa is looking to get a state-owned bank in order to be able to bridge the financial inclusion gap in South Africa and get more financial assistance to businesses and individuals. A number of, I think about, there's a healthy percentage of South Africans who, while they have bank accounts, don't have access to loans, which are needed for them to carry out their business practices. So the South African, Tito Mboweni, is saying that they're looking to get hold of a state-owned bank. Although some analysts have questioned why they would need that. I mean, you're the state. If you need to disburse assistance to businesses and individuals, you can do that without owning a bank. But that's our African business update.
Well, good information from Herbert Wigwe, who is the chair of the committee of bank CEOs, saying that they are committed to making sure that they follow the directives of the CBN, Central Bank of Nigeria, which will now henceforth make Forex available to authorize commercial institutions, commercial banks, financial institutions. Well, but as they say in that commonplace, phrase, the taste of the pudding is in the eating. What the CBN is concerned about is arbitrage, and the BDCs, the Bureau de Change, exceeding their mandate and using the opportunity of the licenses to abuse the system. But it's not as if the banks themselves are innocent. So that's why I said the taste of the pudding is in the eating. When we see it, we'll believe it. Because the main problem we have in this country is that every policy of government, no matter how well-meaning, what you face in the long run is that institutions just find a way of, sidestepping the policy for either institutional or individual benefits. But we have the chairman of the committee of CEOs giving us assurance that this will not happen this time around. So we're looking forward to seeing those teller points. And we hope that the banks would, protect their own integrity and try to be transparent as they now manage, this new, dollar provision regime. That's very important. Otherwise, we'll also come here and protest. As for the sovereign agency, the NSIA, yes, it is good, but we're told we're going to build a world-class hospital in Abuja. Why build a new world-class hospital? Why not upgrade the national hospital in Abuja that is already there and that is in need of, improvement, of, overhaul? Maybe the NSIA, the Sovereign Investment Authority should consider that before thinking of embarking on another gigantic project that will take years. 20 similar projects will be provided in other parts of the country, we're told. Well, maybe that will help solve the problem of medical tourism so that certain persons that we know very well will not be going to London for stomach upset or for, all kinds of routine ailments and then give us the excuse that they've been using the same doctors for 40 years. We have competent doctors in Nigeria, but maybe perhaps what they need is the best work environment. The NSIA may also look at some of these abandoned so-called world-class hospitals that some governors built and abandoned. Big structures, they didn't provide the necessary equipment. They left office. Other governors just ignored those white elephant projects. These are some of the things we can look at. But Ucheoji, the head of the NSIA, tells us that the Niger Bridge will be completed. That's good news. By mid-2022, that the Lagos-Ibadan Expressway will also be completed, and that there are plans to also complete the Abuja-Kano Expressway. And fertilizer plants will be upgraded from 16 across the country to 47. We had the president of the Rice Farmers Association on this program. Fertilizer was one of the problems he identified, that farmers are spending a lot to buy, scarce fertilizer with foreign exchange, with scarce foreign exchange. Well, we hope that all of these problems will be solved and that also employment will be generated accordingly, and that the head of the NSIA was not just telling us what we need to hear.
Okay. Real quickly, Rotus, for me, this is the solution. The CBN should create an e-portal that as they make the allocations to the bank, companies that bid for Forex, they can see there the company that the bank is giving the Forex to, how they are getting it. That's the way to solve the fraud, so that we'll have an independent system. I'll probably make the e-portal open to general public.
Very quick. I just want to make a quick point on that, Rufai. Just very quick. There's a form, so they're making sure that everybody who comes to request Forex fills out a form. And then also, as far as transparency, just a very quick point to respond to what Dr. was talking about earlier. It's easier for the central bank to monitor the banks than it is to monitor 5,500 BDCs. So hopefully, but your point is well made.
And that's why I'm saying let's have a real-time e-portal that all of us can see, that even me here can log on to that e-portal and I will know the companies that got what was the bidding like and all of that. Secondly, I think what they should do, what the NSIA should do, is the moribund federal medical centers across the state. Turn them into world-class centers of excellence. I think when Olusegun was starting the Federal Medical Center, that was his intention. Let's make the Federal Medical Center in each state be even better than any Johns Hopkins hospital you can ever think of, or Cedars-Sinai Hospital in America. That's the way to go. And I'm totally in support of companies using tax breaks to be able to do infrastructure. Because when the companies even pay the taxes, and the federal government allocates that money in budget, the money is still siphoned due to corruption. So it's best companies go ahead and we see, but we have to monitor that process so that companies don't fleece us off taxes. So we can see the period what they are doing. That's just what I feel. So we'll go to Michael real quickly. Thank you so much for your time, Rotus. Michael Wilson joining us now from France. Great to have you, Michael. Good morning.
Good morning. Yes, so what we're looking at this morning really globally is the fact that markets are trying to digest what was considered to be slightly disappointing data from the United States yesterday in terms of growth and also the jobless figures. But of course, it is the end of the month. And traditionally, people try to up their books by then. So will it be the end of a good month in general? Come on to more of that later. As far as Asia Pacific is concerned, volatile trading, no particular reason why. Firstly, in Chinese stocks, as it's been all week, Alibaba, Tencent, Meituan, up and down all over the place. Shanghai Composite down about 0.5%. The Hong Kong index itself, the Hang Seng, has been down 8%. As you know, some days this week it's up about 2% today. The Nikkei down. So basically, markets all over the place. However, some firm corporate suspicions about Didi. Now, this is the China ride-hailing group. The suspicion is it might be wishing to go private to appease the authorities in China. As you know, as we reported, they've started antitrust proceedings against it, and also cybersecurity probe as well of Didi. So the company's actually denied it, but as you can understand, people are looking at it and thinking, well, is this the way forward? I mean, you look back, and we've reported on this ad infinitum, haven't we, in the past, about Amazon, Alibaba, and so on, joining the ranks of those companies that have come under scrutiny from the Chinese authorities. As far as the United States is concerned, yes, so I did mention those growth figures. I didn't think they were that bad, actually. Expected to be 8.2 for the second quarter year-on-year, turned out to be 6.5, and also jobless claims up quite a bit. But the fact of the matter is that when you're looking at markets which look at whether interest rates are going to rise, and this was chiming in really with the Fed, are they going to rise sooner rather than later? Probably not as a result of these figures. Amazon shares, I'll come on to Amazon in a second, down about 7.4%. Robinhood didn't do brilliantly, actually. The online brokerage, again, we were talking about it yesterday, debut price $38 a share, ended up $34 a share. So people actually being relatively cautious about that new stock. So let's talk about Amazon. It's the big tech one, really. What they've offered is guidance, like a lot of others have, about the quarters not being quite the success that they have been in the past. Nevertheless, third $100 billion in the second quarter. That is the third $100 billion figure in a row. But as I say, it missed on revenues. I happen to say that earnings per share, $15.12 versus $12.30 that people are actually expecting. I don't particularly see what's wrong with that. But nevertheless, people mark down Amazon because it's not showing that kind of stellar growth. No, I'm going to take you to Disney and Scarlett Johansson. What she's been doing, she's suing Disney about her movie called Black Widow. What you tend to have is this kind of thing called a 3-month theatrical window. In other words, what it means is that if you're a film star, we wish, and your contract were actually tied to box office receipts, it tends to allow 3 months of that before it starts streaming. What Disney have done is disagreed with that. They've started streaming straight away. So it's reckoned that the poor dear may lose quite about $50 million from her income as a result of this. So the lawyers are getting their teeth into that fairly quickly. Now, big companies. I think this is a really important big corporate issue as well. Big investors are actually saying to companies, listen, don't just talk about carbon emissions and climate change and what you're actually doing. We want to see details about what you're doing. Now, these big shareholders, they're not inconsiderate ones. JP Morgan, M&G, 51 others. They want companies to outline how, not just talking about it, but actually in detail how their companies are going to measure up to these climate change restrictions, which we're talking about net zero for many companies by 2030, which is not that far away. Net zero, not total zero, net zero. EU markets, basically EU and the UK, we're going to get GDP figures out in about 30 minutes' time in Europe. Really, markets once again wondering if they're going to achieve a sort of good month that June was. Is July going to be the same? We'll see. As far as commodities are concerned, we normally start with oil, but I want to bring your attention to natural gas, if I may, because what's happened there is the UK and the EU are noticing the highest prices actually on record. Global supplies are being crimped by all those things that we know crimp those gas supplies. Very, very tight indeed. And of course, natural gas is something which is used for industry, power generation, and also domestic heating. So it's got a wide range of cost implications if those prices continue to rise. Oil prices rebound. It took a while for them actually to wonder about the inventory figures from the United States. There were substantial falls in inventories overnight, the announcement overnight into Thursday's trade. They didn't really take a lot of attention to that. I would have done if I'd been an oil trader, but I'm not. Brent 75, West Texas Intermediate about 73, both retreated about 3% today. And finally, gold. Well, obviously, a weaker dollar means it's cheaper to buy, and it could be. Now, if you look at the charts, people tend to look at technical charts as far as gold's concerned. So we're looking at about 1828. It could be 1835. That could be the next barrier. Probably not by the end of trade today, but maybe sometime next week. That's your global view.
Michael, two things. One, Didi going private. What is wrong with that? And, Didi even wants to go ahead and delist from the New York Stock Exchange. And secondly, IMF, yes, has been consistent in saying that, crypto assets are unreliable as assets. But then yesterday, IMF released a paper in which the IMF was saying that it's going to help economies in the transition, to digital currency. What exactly will be the shape of the role of the IMF in that particular regard? Because the report, as reported, is not detailed enough.
First of all, Didi, don't think there's any problem about it going private. What it is, it's an indication of them trying to appease the local authorities within China, the regulatory authorities, which are taking the actions which I described about antitrust and also about cybersecurity. So, in other words, if this is a way of Didi and other companies actually appeasing Chinese authorities by not listing on a foreign exchange, but by just going private and relying on private investors. Again, big questions. Where do they come from? Don't see a problem about that at all. It's just a very important shift in the way that companies are financing themselves. As far as the IMF is concerned, I think that central banks all the way around the world are actually, as you know, and as we've reported on this, have been looking at cryptocurrencies, not Bitcoin and the rest of them, but their own currencies for payments of health and so on, and also it gives them control over where money's spent. I think that would certainly help the IMF as well, because as you know, all they've done in the past is they've given either grants or they've given loans to countries. And the way in which the conditions of those grants and conditions of those loans has either helped and often in not cases hindered those companies' recovery might be helped by them looking at digital currencies and say, what we want to do is we will give you this money, but it has to be targeted towards X, Y, and Z rather than buying, nice cars for politicians around the world.
Michael, I'm all about the pandemic and how it's changing our world, and in this instance, business. Big tech companies yesterday in America, Netflix, Google, and Facebook, issuing vaccination mandates for their offices' resumption. What are the implications of this? Are we going to be seeing businesses evolving into hybrid spaces, more flexible workspaces, or layoffs?
I would, if it has to be, if we are going to be kept away from offices, which I've said in the past, I don't necessarily think is a good idea, because I think you're missing out on one of life's experiences if you don't work in an office, but life work experiences if you don't work in an office. But if it's got to be hybrid, if that's the way forward, then that's the way forward. But there'll be an enormous amount of change, because A, you need to keep management of your staff if they're not actually in the office, but B, maybe it'll be a reflection of how these staff are rewarded, because if they're working from home, they may be using their own expenses to keep the company going. It's very, very complicated indeed. I suspect that, the big thing that right now worries me about the big tech companies is who actually will be double vaccinated, because there may be members of their staff that actually don't have access to vaccinations, maybe for religious reasons don't want to do it, maybe simply aren't old enough to fall into the state program. So it's intensely complicated. All the tech companies that have said this yesterday said they were going to be very flexible about it. So I think it's a lot more to be decided before we can draw conclusions from it. But if it's got to be hybrid, then it's hybrid. But I really want to underline the fact I think it's important to work with office colleagues in a location.
All right, two things, Michael, real quickly. Number one will be Rishi Sunak coming out to say the British economy is looking good, that 560,000 people have gotten off furlough since about July, and up till now, it's now about 1.9 million people off furlough, that the economy has started to grow again, that more businesses are opening up. I mean, does that really show the state of the British economy? Also knowing the fact that Britain has over a 300 billion pound sterling debt lurking around somewhere, most of the money collected for COVID this year. And secondly, Robinhood didn't do well on the stock market yesterday when it made its debut. What was the reason? Was it because they kept some specific shares for members only and they sold the other shares? There was not that sense of enthusiasm, coming as regards the Robinhood share listings yesterday.
I was cautious about Robinhood. I don't know the reasons for why it didn't achieve the share price that it started off at. It may be just something to do with the markets. I really don't know. Maybe people looked at it and didn't particularly like what they saw. I mean, if it's just the company, it's doing particularly well. It's got plenty of paid-for subscribers. I think the problem with it, if you really want to get philosophical about it, is that I don't think people should be looking at it and thinking, oh, this is an easy way into the stock market, an easy way into cryptocurrencies, an easy way into options, because these are incredibly complicated fields to get involved with, particularly if it's your own money. It's all right just putting a little bit here and there, a little flutter here and there, but actually to be really involved in a market, you've got to harden yourself for you may get big gains, you may also get big losses as well. I don't think that's anything to do with the share price of Robinhood yesterday. I think it's probably the way forward in lots of ways, because it does allow Joe Soap, as I would call him or her, or Jemima Soap, an entry into stock markets rather than going in a more traditional way. As far as the UK economy is concerned, I get the business about furlough being over and all the rest of it, but we haven't actually attacked and looked at the real problems of where national income is going to be spent on utilities, on the health service, and so on. And there's this curious feeling that more and more people are looking, there is a money tree out there. Good heavens, I didn't know there was. I thought only socialists thought there was a money tree. Now it turns out that conservatives think there's a money tree too. There isn't a money tree. This government actually, never mind what Rishi Sunak actually says, surprises me in lots of ways, because what it should be doing is saying, this is how capitalism works. You encourage entrepreneurs, they start businesses, they get taxed. That's how you get money. There is no money tree. That is the problem. Really, money tree policy, if you like, that's what's happening in the UK. I don't believe in it.
I get the pun there. Money tree, money tree. Thank you, Michael. Really appreciate it. Have a great weekend. Adesua, over to you as always.
Thank you, Rufai. This morning, as we take a look at what has happened across the globe in the last 24 hours as regards the COVID-19 pandemic, let us focus a bit more on a vaccination drive globally, which remains unequal. According to the Johns Hopkins University tally, more than 4 billion doses of coronavirus vaccines have now been administered around the world. It took 8 months after the vaccination drive started. Data shows that the global inoculation have slowed slightly, with the 4th billion reached in 30 days, while it took only 26 days to reach the previous one. The first and second billion were reached after about 140 and 40 days respectively. Well, some 40% of these shots have been administered in China, which has administered 1.6 billion doses, while India follows with 451 million. The US comes in third place with 343 million doses. And let's look at the figures here in Nigeria, this time around for infections. Nigeria yesterday recorded its highest daily count of COVID-19 infections in the last 4 months. A total of 558 cases and 2 deaths were recorded. This makes it the biggest daily increase in the country since March 4, 2021, when 708 cases were confirmed. Although 16 states were responsible for the new infections, Lagos again posted majority of the total cases in the last 24 hours. And back to vaccination drive. The WHO Regional Director for Africa, Dr. Moeti, says the continent is entering an encouraging phase as COVID vaccine supply to Africa increase. Dr. Moeti says nearly 4 million doses from COVAX arrived in Africa last week, compared to the whole of June, when only 245,000 doses arrived on the continent. So far, almost 79 million COVID-19 doses has arrived the continent, and 21 million people, or 1.6% of Africa's population, have been fully vaccinated. The rise in vaccine shipment comes at a time when Africa is in its second week of falling case numbers. That is good news. after a steep and unbroken 8-week surge. However, some countries, I must say, are buckling under the pressure of surging cases, such as Senegal, where hospitals are overwhelmed with new arrivals. According to Dr. Moeti, the highly transmissible Delta variant has been found in 26 African countries. The Alpha variant has been detected in 38 and the Beta variant in 35. And to Myanmar now, where half of the country's 54 million population could be infected with COVID-19 in the next 2 weeks. And that's according to the British ambassador to the UN. The warning comes as Myanmar's envoy calls for the UN to ensure the delivery of vaccines. The country has been in chaos since a coup 6 months ago. According to local media in the country, Senior General Min Aung, in his speech, has actually called for more cooperation on prevention, control, and treatment of the virus, including with fellow members of the Association of Southeast Asian Nations and those he refers to as friendly countries. Finally, to the U.S., where all federal workers will soon need to be vaccinated against COVID-19 or face stringent restrictions in the workplace. U.S. President Joe Biden issued new guidelines, including mask wearing, social distancing, and regular tests for those who can prove they have been immunized. President Joe Biden is also calling on states and local government to offer $100 to every newly vaccinated American.
Let's start with Myanmar. Yes, Myanmar is facing a lot of problems with a spike in COVID cases. There is also the problem of flooding. There is absolute confusion in Myanmar. But I think it is right that the U.S. Deputy Ambassador to the United Nations has made the point that, look, the problem is the military in Myanmar. And the United States has been urged, other countries have also been urged to put pressure on the military in Myanmar to return to the democratic path. You will recall that in February, the Myanmar authorities, led by the senior general, decided to move against the government led by Aung San Suu Kyi, that had won the November 2020 general elections in Myanmar. But the military in Myanmar has not been of any great help. There's oxygen scarcity, as you can see there on the screen. You've had the military in Myanmar also clamping down on hospital workers in the midst of this pandemic. And now you have the senior general, Halang, I don't know how to pronounce the name, but I think the name is H-L-A-N-G. Yes. But Senior General Lang is now appealing to the world to come to his aid. But he said the Senior General in a position to do that. You will recall that in April, there was a meeting of the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, the ASEAN. And at that meeting, there was a 5-point resolution about how Myanmar can return to normalcy. But the senior general has rejected those 5 points. He doesn't intend to do anything about them. Only yesterday, they issued a statement officially cancelling the November 2020 general elections. But I prefer the position of Tom Andrews. Tom Andrews is a UN Special Investigator on human rights. And Tom Andrews, on the floor of the UN yesterday, was reporting that perhaps there should be a COVID ceasefire in Myanmar. Yes, you may have a bad government in place. You may have the senior general and his team misbehaving and harassing the Kachin people in the northern part of Myanmar. But Andrews' argument, which I think should be pushed, is that the rest of the world should not abandon the people of Myanmar. You can put sanctions on the military, but don't abandon the people. And I hope that, that is the only justification, the strong justification at a time when the entire world is facing this COVID crisis, to go to the rescue of the people of Myanmar and continue to put pressure on the soldiers that have hijacked the people's will and are terrorizing the innocent people of Myanmar. However, it's in the entire Southeast Asia, in Indonesia, in Cambodia, even in the Philippines, where you have this surge. But the situation in Myanmar is particularly bad. As for the United States, yes, President Biden, yes, what he talked about is not just about federal workers. having to show evidence that they have taken the vaccine, having to go through compulsory testing on a regular basis. The new rules, the new guidelines, as articulated by President Biden, also applies to federal contractors who also have to show evidence. It also applies to states and local governments. States and local governments have been encouraged to give anybody that takes the vaccine $100 as some kind of incentive. And we have seen this before. It is also an attempt to encourage small and medium-scale businesses to make sure that they also follow the path of the federal government and ensure vaccination. So two things. What President Biden is trying to do in this regard is to encourage vaccination rates, because as we pointed out here, in many parts of the U.S., the Delta variant has become a problem. The virus, the uptick in the infection rate is going up. And he calls it appropriately, he says this is an American tragedy among the unvaccinated. And I think he's very right. And Florida presents us this morning with a very peculiar example. In Florida, it has been discovered that even among children that are under 12 or just slightly under 12, the infection rate has gone up. But the governor in Florida is insisting, is saying no to vaccination, no to mandates, no to lockdowns, so that you now have a situation whereby local councils in Oregon County and other counties are rebelling against the governor. I think his name is the Winners. And what you now have is that some of these counties are introducing their own measures. And Florida is not the only place where there has been that uptick, prompting the federal government to say, no, this is the way to go to protect America and prevent a tragedy. It's the same situation in Missouri, in Arkansas, and to some extent also in Mississippi.
I mean, it's quite sad. And you can read a method to the madness. So, Dr. Bati talked a lot about Myanmar. Let's start from Myanmar. The problem with Myanmar started with Aung San Suu Kyi herself. When she supported the military government, when they attacked the people of the Rakhine state, and she felt, she had it under control. She defended it. She did not know that same military was going to come back to attack her. So it starts from when you support injustice in the first place. And when injustice has been done to you, don't complain, because you supported it. You could have stopped it. She could have stopped the attack on the people in the Rakhine state, but she didn't. Now the military has thrown her under the bus. Now the military thought they had control over the country. The country has been torn apart. And guess what happens? Coronavirus sets in. Now they are calling on the same Western world that they pushed aside formally, because they felt they were in charge. And that's what happens to people that think they have it all, that they have power. It will always come back to bite you. So I'm happy, because you will not allow people of Myanmar die because of the madness of its leaders. So you will still have to help them. It even goes further to talk about what is happening in America. Most of the states, Missouri, Arkansas, all the southern states, are pushing this anti-vaxxer narrative. We're not going to take the vaccine. You can look at the upsurge in their cases. There's a method to this madness. The more you take the vaccines, the lower the numbers will reduce. At least hospitalization will drop. It has been shown, it's evident in the UK. The reason why the UK could open up to have the Euro 2020 was because they are taking the vaccines. The hospitalization numbers kept on dropping. Yeah, there are new cases of COVID. Delta virus will still slip through. But hospitalization numbers are dropping. Now in the UK, even in Wales, but the science is, as long as you take the vaccine, the cases will drop. But I don't know who is selling that wrong anti-vaxxer narrative to them. Probably it was started by a certain man called Donald J. Trump that went back to take the vaccine himself after taking a monococcal cocktail when he was sick of coronavirus that he almost died. But it is obvious that 3 lessons we'll learn from all this coronavirus brouhaha: the lack of leadership, selfishness, and not following the scientifically laid down rules. Because it's obvious everywhere you go. It's obvious in Tunisia. That's why you're seeing the uprising. This has led to a political crisis between the Hana party. It's obvious every part of the world. And when you juxtapose this with countries that have done well, like New Zealand, you see the forthright leadership. Countries that have done well, like Taiwan, you see the forthright leadership. So where you see appropriate forthright leadership, coronavirus is nipped in the bud. When you see bad leadership, coronavirus increases. It's a human problem.
Well, just before we go, with regard to Africa, Tanzania has received 1 million doses from the United States through the COVAX facility. Yes. We're told that by September, we'll be receiving 10 million from COVAX facility on a monthly basis. Yes, fine. It's good to see that the rest of the world is paying more attention to the vulnerable parts of the world and providing support in Southeast Asia, Latin America, and Africa. But African leaders themselves must be prepared. We have had cases where some African countries had to give out their vaccine doses. We hope that that will not happen this time around because, yes, 10 million per month from September, but Africa needs about 820 million vaccine doses to be able to vaccinate just 30% of the population. At the moment, the African countries have only been able to do 1.6 vaccination. We're far behind the rest of the world. So it's not just to celebrate, as Dr. Mueti pointed out, that we're getting more vaccines, but our governments must be ready with structures and logistics.
Very well said. Thank you so much.